you grew up?
I grew up in Moscow. I was born to a very young family, not very well off, up until my teens at least. And I was homeschooled. That's probably the most interesting thing about me because it was very uncommon in Russia at the time. And I was homeschooled for financial reasons as well, because my parents could not afford a good private school, and government schools were just terrible, and they decided to homeschool me, and I homeschooled most of my life. I had a little break when I went to Canada for a year into a boarding school, Appleby College, which is quite famous in Canada. I didn't like it at all. I returned to Russia and finished homeschooling, and I think it was the best decision of my life.
How was a normal class day being homeschooled? Because it's not really common either here in Chile. Who was your teacher? Do you see, looking back, any advantages and disadvantages of being homeschooled?
I see a lot of missed opportunities, but not because homeschool is a bad choice. It's just because my parents were so inexperienced and there was no opportunities to learn how it's done. So I can see that I could have learned much more than I did, but even what I learned was more and better than what I would have learned at school. And I was very worried when I enrolled into university that I would lag behind, because, like, you know, those people, they finished schools and I never did, and it turned out to be the opposite. Like the first year at university, I just couldn't understand why my mates didn't know the things that were obvious to me. But there wasn't much structure to the way I was learning. I was lucky enough that my parents had a lot of background knowledge themselves. So my grandfather, he was quite a famous scientist in Russia, a physician. My parents are doctors, medical doctors. So they were able to teach me biology. I had an English teacher coming to teach me, but other than that, and I had like my grandmother's friend. She was very knowledgeable in literature and history. Her father was friends with Leo Tolstoy, and they had like his books, his autographs, his portraits, all those things. So I get lucky. I come from a good family, not from a rich family, but from a very good family. And they were able to give me a decent education themselves. But again, because they had no experience, because they had nowhere to learn from, I see a lot of missed opportunities. The thing that people mention when I talk about homeschooling is that, how do you socialize? Children need to socialize. There's so many ways people can socialize today. Even back then, I got interested in internet very early on. So in 1995, I was 10 years old and I was already online, this antique version of internet.
Yes.
It was very unusual at the time. But I socialized through net meeting. If anyone remembers what it is, it was something that was way before ICQ even, and you probably don't remember what ICQ is. So it was one of this rudimentary messaging system that was meant for business, but allowed you to look for friends on the internet.
Now very popular, by the way, because very Facebook and all this.
Yes. It was not very popular, but I socialized on the internet. I socialized, and then when I turned into my late teens, that's when you started to get proper social networks like LiveJournal, for example. And LiveJournal was opened the world for me. In Russia, it was a very big deal. I think it can be compared to MySpace, maybe to the same. Like it was a similar. MySpace was a similar phenomenon in the U.S. Like LiveJournal was in Russia, and I made great friends. I started to hang out, and what internet offered me is a chance to choose my friends, because you have this, like, people who go to school, they have this weird idea that school is a great place for socialize. What's better than to pick a lifelong friend from 30 people that you're locked in the same room for 12 years, without having a chance to actually pick someone you like. To me, it always felt absurd, because why choose from 30 people that you're involuntarily crammed into a room with when you can pick from billions of people online? And that's where I found my friends, and some of the friends I'm still friends with for 20 years now.
How's a normal day? Like, you wake up at 8, you have to, that's very interesting.
This is something, I mentioned that my parents were not very experienced. So
I believe you were never late to school.
I was never late to school, but I was sleeping in. I didn't have, this is still a problem, if talking about problem. The problem for me was that I was not living by the schedule, really. I was avid reader So it was very easy to convince me to read a book, to read the textbook, to do something. I loved that. I loved studying. But I never had a proper schedule. And we just mentioned internet. I was 12. I was staying up until 4 in the morning, and my parents couldn't do anything about it. And I was explaining it away, saying, "Hey, you know, my friends like from Ohio that I met on net meeting, you know, it's a broad daylight there. And I got to talk with them, and you know, I'm learning English, and I did learn English.
Very well.
So there were issues. I'm not proud of how I spent most of my time. I think it could have been organized much better. But again, I can't blame my parents for it, because they did an experiment that was very new, that they had no idea how to do right. Today, coming from having this experience, you know, living my life, I know so many things that could have been done better. I could have spoke not just like the languages I do speak now. I speak several languages like French, some Japanese as well, but I could have spoke fluently like 5 or 6 languages just by using the same amount of time that I had. But well, I'm going to apply that knowledge to my own children.
Well, I'm in favor of you. Like, how many kids from a normal school, like a proper school, speak many languages or as many languages as you? Like,
absolutely.
Still
Absolutely. And again, we're talking about a boy who grew up in a poor family. Yes, my family became rich, but only when
on the way of raising you.
Yeah,
like,
only when I became, like in my late teens, I actually felt that I was better off than my neighbors, not before that. And they gave me that knowledge through sheer will to experiment, and I'm grateful for
What do you think was the main advantage that you reckon, looking back, of being homeschooled?
I'm not used to obeying. Because the main thing that government schools teach is not, they don't give you knowledge. They teach subjugation and helplessness. They teach you to be helpless. So whenever a person of authority tells you something, you obey, because in school there's no other way to exist, right? I never had that experience. So for me, when I enrolled into university, for example, I had so many conflicts with my teachers. Not because I was like lagging behind in doing something, no, because in Russia universities suck. They're very politicized, and a lot of teachers, they very small power over the students, you know, to grandstand, you know, to humiliate. I never tolerated that. I had a conflict on my first course of university, where we had this we had this teacher who was very old. He was very old school, and they only kept him because they need to have a certain number of PhDs to qualify for some grants. And this was obvious. His lessons were terrible. And he was humiliating students every time someone came in late, like literally humiliating. It's like, it's terrible to hear. And at one point, another student started arguing with him, and he just canceled the lecture and made how do you call it in English? The head of the department to gather us, you know, to say we're sorry. And I watched every single student before me saying he was sorry for something he hasn't done, saying sorry for a situation that he didn't create. And I was terrified just looking at it, and I was the only one who said, what the hell? You know, I'm not sorry for anything. He should be sorry because of him we couldn't have a lesson. We're wasting our time here, you know, what is this circus? And yeah, I'm pretty sure that was because I never went to school.
That's really interesting what you mentioned. This is like such a rude characteristic of the educational system right now. Well, you study in the Russian State University of Humanities.
Yeah.
Where you study.
That's where the story happened.
Yes, I couldn't tell. So you study political science there, or because you were there for 2 years and then you moved to Nottingham
University of Nottingham in the UK. Yes, I studied the same subject in Russia and the UK.
Why did you move, and what do you notice different?
I moved because Russian universities, especially when talking about political sciences, are crap. They are awful. And if you want, if you want to learn politics, to learn philosophy, you don't want to study in Russia if you can afford not to. And Britain, on the contrary, I have a lot of issues with the educational system in the UK as well, but relatively speaking, it's one of the better ones. And I thought, unlike school education, university education is something that can be useful. I starting to doubt that as well. But I learned something. Like, I didn't learn anything in the Russian State University of Humanities. I learned something in UK.
Well, you learn how, or you get to witness how the educational system works internally. So that's something to learn, I believe.
And
not what you were expecting, but
and again, it's a good thing. You need to have, and I'm grateful for my parents. Like I mentioned to my parents that I went for a year to this boarding school in Canada because it gave me an opportunity to look into this educational system as well and see what's wrong with it. And I have lots of stories about that as well.
That's great. I want to get into that too. But there's a memory that you recall that impacted you as much as the one that you just mentioned in the Nottingham University?
It wasn't as bad. I think it was not a bad university. I think if you study humanitarian science, like how do you call it in English? If you study humanes, you don't really need to go to university, but you need to have a lot of personal discipline, which I didn't have. I mentioned it. So I think it was helpful in that sense. But if you are self-motivated, if you can schedule your own time, there's nothing a university, even a good university, can give you if you study humanes. It's different if you study physics. It's different if you want to be a doctor. It's different if you require a laboratory or equipment. You got to go into university, no doubt about that. But if you want to learn social sciences, you can do it at home today much more efficiently. You can watch a lecture from Harvard from the best. From the best lecturers.
Best lecturers. It's everything on YouTube and on internet.
And then you can watch a lecture from Oxford, and then you can watch a lecture from MIT, and then you can watch a lecture from University of Nottingham. Everything is online. So why would you go into debt? And people go into debt to enroll into university.
And you have the time to go to the books that they probably won't give you sometimes. Like it happened, let's say here in Chile, let's say economics. Like I don't believe many economists today in Chile just graduate knows anything about Austrian School of Economics.
Yeah, well, again, because the universities are so biased nowadays. Yeah, but again, coming to like textbooks, like what struck me in Nottingham, and coming from Russia, it was not a problem for me, and I'm going to explain why. But textbooks, they cost what? Hundreds of dollars, so British pounds, very expensive. And in Russia, I never experienced that. But in Russia, I was used to pirating, and and again, it's education that you want to receive. And if you are self-motivated, if you have no problem with discipline, you can study social scientists from your own home, and do that. It's just a better way, and you're going to save money, you're going to save time, you're going to get more different experiences. Like whatever money you would spend on a university, you can spend traveling, seeing the world, experiencing things that you will never experience in the university, because today universities, they don't give you that much experience. And again, go on.
No, I'm really interested in those memories, in those memories that you can recall, or particular memories that impact you back in Russia, because I actually got into libertarian ideas because I went to med school in Argentina, where more than medicine, I learned a lot about Allende and Che Guevara, and all this. I learned about Puebla, all these kind of things. I learned a lot about that, but not much about medicine, and that's what got me into libertarian ideas, because it didn't make sense to me, and I started to look for answers.
But it makes sense to the government, because the government doesn't want you to be a professional. Government does not want you to be self-reliant or successful. Government wants you to obey, and in order to make you obey, it instills those ideas into your brain while you're young and dependent on the university for your life. Basically.
It is. I completely agree. I believe the educational system is one of the main issues in Occident, at least. So just one more memory that you could recall from a Russian university that impact you positively or negatively?
No, well, Russian university was just a waste of time. There's nothing good I can recall. There's nothing positive apart from that I moved to UK and it was better there. So 1 out of 10 would not recommend. Really, there's no story. Like, okay, there is another story. Yeah, all right, a Me Too story. A Me Too story. Okay, Russia is a fairly homophobic society, and there's a lot of closed homosexuals in Russia. And apparently, but they are still, they wield some power. Like, it's not like in Iran where you can't be a homosexual and be in power. In Russia, you can be a homosexual and be in power, and some universities had this situation. And basically, I wrote an article on the rise of Me Too, that I had a Me Too story as well, that when I was studying in Russian University of Humanities, a dean of the school that I was studying at was trying to hit on me. And basically what he did, I got in trouble, I went to the dean's office and he locked the room, and he started to attempt to kiss me, and I told him to fuck off. And again, just thinking back about it is the reason I knew how to say no is probably because I never went to school, because I did not feel this person had authority over me. I didn't respect it, like he didn't earn my respect. So I told him to fuck off, and from what I've heard, it was an issue for many, many years, from before I became a student there till after I left. And I've heard some bad stories.
You probably weren't the first, absolutely.
I wasn't the first, definitely.
And not
the
last.
way he approached me, the way he was acting, it felt very sleazy. And again, if there was someone else there, it might have turned quite differently.
That's terrible. That's terrible, and it's a great point that you mentioned.
So learn to say no. This is a very libertarian thing.
It is.
Learn to say no. It will save you lots of
from
trouble.
a kiss of the dean.
Yeah, well, as well.
Many other things, right?
Yeah.
How long you been in Chile?
I've been in Chile for 2 weeks. Just arrived recently. I've been traveling around Latin America for over a year and a half since I was forced to leave Russia, and I'm just looking at the way people live.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Why did you have to leave Russia?
Well, I had to leave Russia because it became impossible to do politics, and a lot of my friends got arrested, were forced into exile, and basically my entire team, like the people with whom I was organizing the rallies, I was organizing the lectures, they are all in exile right now. So some of them in Tbilisi, Georgia, some of them in Turkey, some of them in Baltic states, and they just had to leave on a very short notice because people started to get arrested, and you could feel that it's getting closer. And what forced me to leave is a good friend of mine, Andrei Pivovarov. He's not a libertarian, but he's one of the opposition leaders in Russia as well. He got taken off the plane on his way out of Russia. This is the first time it happened, and before that, mostly the kind of people who got arrested were quite quite more influential than I am. And Andrei Pivovarov, he's very close to the same level of influence that I have. Maybe I was even more influential at a certain time. And that's when I realized that unless I'm going to leave soon, I may not get a second chance. And I was proved right, because then the war started, and now I'm 100% sure that if I was to return, I would be put in jail indefinitely. And Andrei Pivovarov, he's still in jail.
And you also had some experiences in jail for some,
yeah.
I think 3 times, right?
Several, no, I think it was more than that. I think it was 4 or 5 in total, but not for a long haul. So I only spent, in total I spent like 3 or 4 months in jail.
Why did you get prison? Why did you get prison for?
Because government is unhappy with you. Like the biggest story, my longest sentence was after I disagreed to cancel a political rally that I was organizing. That government really wanted me to relocate on a different date. And that's how government sort of tests your weaknesses. So I was invited into the mayor's office, not to talk with the mayor, but with one of his representatives, where he was convincing me that the rally that I wanted to hold was impossible to hold at that time, at that place, and they were offering shitty places, and they used this technique many, many times before, and I criticized every single politician who bended to the government's will. So I said, well, it's impossible because people are counting on me. They are. This is where the rally is going to take place, and there's nothing I can do. So on my way out of the building, I was apprehended by police, by special forces, and I was talked to by some of these, like, I'm not going to call it secret agents. I'm not sure how it's called in English, but by the arm of police that, like,
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, that pressures you basically. Yeah. So I was pressured, interviewed, and then locked in the cell, and then put in jail for over a month. Yeah,
that's incredible.
But again, a month in jail is not that bad. It's I always use this as an opportunity to read lots of books because there's nothing else to do. You just read.
There's a great intellectual that I love. There's called Antonio Svetov, who also was put in jail, I think 2 or 3 times. And the last time he was put in jail for over 2 years, he came out with a book named The General Treat of Drugs, which was his bestseller and put him well off. So
it's
it was like
you can like because you get cut off of your mundane routine. You can just concentrate on reading and writing, and that's what I did. And I'd say, again, I didn't have a negative experience of it, so I can switch myself off from the surroundings and just concentrate on literature, and it helped me a lot. I know it's different for different people, and I've met people who like I had different activists who were in the same cell as I am, and I saw people, shaking, feeling claustrophobic, fearing for their lives. I'm different in that sense. I become calm. Like whenever I'm in a stressful situation, I just have a wave of calm going through my body, and I don't feel a thing. So for me, it was not difficult.
Humble but pay vacations. Where?
Well, I wouldn't call it a vacation. Again, I wouldn't call it a vacation, but. And I'm just to stress, it's very different from going to jail for years.
Yes.
Again, a month's time, nothing. If you're locked for a year, 2 years, 3 years, it builds up. So people who are still in jail, like Andrei Pivovarov, I just mentioned, he has it immensely worse than I had. Yes. Immensely worse.
No, what Antonio Svetov called his the time in jail as a humble but paid vacation. So
again, it depends on government has means of turning your life into hell in jail.
Absolutely.
So you got to take that into account. For example, Alexei Navalny, who's probably the most famous Russian opposition leader, who's in jail right now after assassination attempt on him. He survived, and he was locked for surviving, basically. Right now, he's being tortured in jail, not by means of putting needles under your nails, but in terms of he's not allowed to read, he's not allowed to socialize, he's not allowed to see his lawyer, he's constantly closed into the isolation chamber, so things like that. And when things like that happen, you can't read anymore, you can't do anything. Don't if you can avoid going to jail, do avoid going to jail, but try to prepare yourself for it anyway.
I believe for people it's hard to picture what it is to be a political oppositor in a totalitarian country. You just were mentioning before we start the interview that one of your friends also have a assassination attempt just recently.
Just today. He's a collaborator on my YouTube channel. He's been on several of my shows. Asechkin, his last name is Asechkin, and he's a whistleblower, and he published a lot of damning footages of torture within the Russian prison system. You can Google his name, he's very prominent. And just today he announced that there was an assassination attempt on him, even though he lives in France, he lives in Paris. There were some agents sent to him that tried to murder him. Terrible, terrible. And Bellingcat is working on that case right now, so they confirmed that the assassination attempt happened. So doing politics in Russia is dangerous business.
It's incredible what you're telling us. As I said, people, it's hard for them to picture how it is actually, and all these anecdotes, these stories, to let them like picture in a better way what it is.
The thing is with the human psychology is that whenever you survive something, it becomes a funny story. It becomes an anecdote. You cease to realize, you know, that's a fucked up situation.
Yes.
And I had a lot of fucked up situations in my life as well. But now that, because I managed to survive, because nothing bad, thank God, happened to me, right now it's just, you know, a conversation piece.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. I completely agree. I completely agree. It gets banalized. Why do you pick Chile now? Why? What?
Well, first of all, I came to see the referendum.
Yeah.
So I timed it to see the voting, to see the results, and it was very uplifting to see that it failed. Well done, guys.
Yes.
Do repeat again. I wanted to see the sentiment on the streets, and it was amazing to see the referendum failing, and you know, people, you know, cheering, you know, coming out with the national flags. It felt like a national unity. So well done. And the piece of advice from someone coming from a country where there are no political institutions: don't uproot the institutions that you have. Improve upon them, build upon them, because it's much easier to destroy than it is to build something new. And your constitution is functional. You have the most functioning society in Latin America, and you should do everything you can to try to preserve it. Because look at your neighbors. Look at Argentina. Look at Bolivia, look at Peru, look how much worse they have it than you do. And be more careful with the kind of reforms that you try to partake in. Again, I'm not saying that your system should not be reformed. I'm not saying it cannot be improved upon. I'm saying that because it's already so much better than a lot of alternatives, you should be careful with it. You should not throw stones in a glass house, so to speak.
Absolutely agree. Did it match your expectations?
Yeah, Chile definitely did. It's my second time in Chile. I was in Chile 8 years ago as a tourist, and I think it's like the city center looks worse than it used to. It looks more seedy, it looks more trashed, and I will never get that thing, you know, like trashing the district where you live in. It just doesn't make sense to me. Las Condes, where I'm staying, is so much nicer because people are not trashing it. You know, get like, and again, the reason why left does it is to perpetuate the poverty, is to perpetuate the social distress. Because whenever people are poor, whenever they are whenever people are poor, whenever they are angry, whenever they have to depend on the government
whenever there is chaos.
Whenever there is chaos, yes, they are so much more vulnerable, and they are so much more willing to surrender their freedoms. And that's what the left bets on. And in that sense, the goals of libertarians are much more ambitious, because we don't want to create a vulnerable individual. We are not trying to subjugate someone. We're trying to elevate people to become self-reliant, to be self-sufficient, to not rely on the government for survival. And it's a much more ambitious task. The question I'm always asked is, you know, if libertarians' ideas are so good, why is it so hard to spread it? Well, because these ideas are good, because they are ambitious. It's much easier to ruin something, it's much easier to subjugate someone than to elevate the person. It's much easier to corrupt than to create. So yeah, it's hard to be a libertarian, but it's a noble thing to be.
I absolutely agree. Mikhail, so you left forcibly, right, from Russia, and why did you pick South America?
Several reasons. I lived in Europe for many years. I spent 4 years in the UK, and I spent almost 4 years in France, and I traveled all around the European Union. I just don't like it. There's not that many freedoms. There's a lot of order. But you're not free in Europe, not just because the taxes are high, but unless you like immensely rich, and I'm talking about like tens of millions of euro, you will never break the ceiling, you will never break out into a better social standing than you are in now. I think vertical mobility in European countries is terrible, is absolutely terrible. Yes, you can be comfortable. Yes, you are guaranteed like a good meal, you know. You are guaranteed that you're not going to live on the street if you work. But you will never break out of your social standing.
That's a great point, because Chile used to be the leader country from the OCDE with the social mobility.
Yeah.
We have the biggest social mobility in all the developing countries.
Yeah.
Well, not anymore,
Well,
evidently, but it's a really important thing, because it's part of what are your goals as an individual, what you want to do with your life. Do you want just to stay every day, living every day like
if you want to exist, then Europe is probably a great place to be, because it's like this retirement house. It's a great retirement house, with great buildings, great architecture, beautiful parks. But if you have ambitions in your life, you're not going to realize yourself in Europe. And look how few names, come out of Europe. Like you can't name a single, like Elon Musk is impossible in Europe. Bill Gates is impossible in Europe.
Well, that's why they're not there.
That's why they're not there. If you have any ambition at all in your life, you don't want to be in Europe. US is a different story. US is much more interesting. It's much more diverse. And this is a country where I can imagine myself to be, but I'm afraid of American globalism. I think American citizenship is basically scary. I know a lot of people want to become American citizens. I don't, because it's the only country with global jurisdiction. So they subjugate you to their own laws. Doesn't matter where you are. So you can act totally legally in one country, but you will be breaking law at the same time in the US, just by virtue of being an American citizen. To me, this is scary. To me, the American tax system is scary. The global taxation system, that doesn't matter where you work, you pay to the American government. I don't want to do that. It has its upsides. So America is a functioning society. Latin America is different. It has a lot of potential. It has a lot of chaos, but it's a different kind of chaos that exists in Russia. From this chaos, you can, if you're ambitious, if you have a strong vision of what you want to do in life, you can realize yourself here. So I love Latin America. It has all the good upsides of Russia and none of the downsides. So you don't have a tyrannical, like you have some tyrannies, like in Venezuela, obviously. I'm very unhappy with Argentina. And I know Chileans, for some reason, have a soft spot for Argentina. I don't get it. Argentina is like going back to USSR today. Like nothing works, nobody works. The city is a mess. Yeah, I didn't like Buenos Aires at all. But anyway, in some of the Latin American countries, there's a lot of opportunity. If you're young, ambitious, and you want to do something out of yourself. So I really, really like it here.
Well, Mikhail, we hope to have you for longer, and of course, if you want to come around again, just give us a call. We always happy to hang out and talk about these philosophical questions and about our societies. It's been great to have you here. I don't know if you have any last words that you would like to share.
Last words. Yeah, I think going back to your constitution is that try to preserve what good you have in Chilean society, because you have a lot of functioning institutions that, yes, some of them require reforms, they can be improved upon, but don't try to uproot them. Look at Russia. We tried it several times. We uprooted it in 1917. Nothing good came out of it. Nothing good comes out of a revolution, in a sense of, don't try to build a new society on the ashes of the old society. Try to build upon the old society. This is how you improve. And this is not just the lesson of Russia. This is the lesson of Great Britain, for example. Look at Great Britain. Yes, some of their institutions don't make sense. I can't really defend monarchy, but I will defend monarchy as it exists today in Great Britain, because uprooting it means a revolution, and revolution means losing all this great knowledge, all this great experience that you as a society had. Again, look at China. China had a revolution. It lost its culture, it lost its institutions, like even on the level like the Shaolin Monastery. Right now it's a Disneyland. There's nothing, there's no history behind it anymore. There's no people who remember what it means to work in the monastery like this.
We don't even need to go too far. We have Venezuela just next, just crossing the fence. So we have Argentina, we have Bolivia, we have Peru, we have Ecuador, we have all these cases, right? All these examples, historical examples of what is being like the essence of South America history, which every time things start to go a little bit right or go a little bit wrong, we try to change everything again.
This is always a mistake, and I understand why it happens, and I think the libertarians have similar worldview sometimes. They think that, we need to get rid of the government. It's anarcho-capitalist, and we need to have a libertarian revolution, and we do need to have a libertarian revolution, but we need to have it as a concept. So as a concept of this perfect society, idea like the Platonic Eddas. It has to be perfect, it has to be different from what we have today, but you are judged by the fruits of your labor. It doesn't matter how good your idea is. If the result of your political work is shit, for example, like communism, okay, it might be a great idea. I disagree, but even if it was a great idea in principle, if it always leads to a disaster, it means you're doing something wrong. And we libertarians should learn from our enemies' mistakes and try to preserve and pick good things that we have, and just slowly moving the society towards freedom. And it is possible to erode the government, to erode its power over people, not uproot it, because if we're going to uproot it, you're not going to end up in a libertarian utopia, you're going to end up in hell. Not a libertarian hell, quite a statist hell. So keep that in mind.
Thank you very much, Mikhail, and taking his last words. We do need to understand that we cannot build from ashes, right? We need to start to build.
I mean, you can if you have no other choice. If the tragedy has already happened, of course you gotta make with what you have, but don't strive for that scenario.
And it's very important also to have you here. We need more libertarian allies. We need to get closer together. For some reason, we tend to just disperse and just don't talk with each other and have these silly discussions about theory instead of actually putting the right effort into promoting our ideas and showing to the society our proposals. What are our proposals? People don't even know what this flag means. They don't even know what libertarianism is. Like, as soon as they see this flag here in the streets in Chile, they call you a fascist. It's like, man, no, the opposite. Like, we're absolutely the opposite to fascism. So, well, great to have you here, Mikhail, and we hope you enjoyed this interview. This is just the first part. Just follow up with the second video so you can see more about this incredible chat that we had with Mikhail Svetov, one of the main leaders of the libertarian movement in Russia. Thank you
very much. Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.